Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you as you watch this. I'm Dr. Dasher. I'm going to be your mentor, so to speak, for this short semester of Introduction to Psychology. This is a survey course, more or less, so that's the way I'll treat it. I'm going to introduce you to psychology. I'm going to cover some highlights. We don't really have time in these virtual lectures, unfortunately, to get hyper in depth. So please read the assignments. If you don't read the assignments or the sections, the chapters, I guess I should call it, you're going to miss a lot because I just don't have time in a short semester like this to be able to give you through a lecture virtually the in-depth experience that I like to give in my intro classes. And I think Intro to Psychology is a very important class. It obviously is if you're going to be a psychology major. You need this information. This is the first building block to lead you into whatever area you may potentially be considering. And here's your starting point. For those of you who aren't psych majors, who are taking this for whatever the reasons you're taking it, still I want you to have an in-depth idea of what psychology is. I want you to understand, for example, psychology is not common sense. Unfortunately, the majority of the population thinks it is, or they have some intuitive kind of a feeling about something, and then they do this amateur diagnosis, and by happenstance, occasionally they're right, but that's rare. We tend to concentrate on those kind of what we call hits in psychology, and we slough off the misses. So the statistics indicate that most of the time, if you're guessing that you can be correct in some diagnosis, untrained diagnosis of somebody's problems, you're way off base, because most of the stuff that goes on in psychology is under the cover. We mask things as human beings. So that's just a kind of an opening salvo of the kind of thinking. I'm going to briefly go over some things in this short lecture. Again, welcome to the course. If you need me, read the syllabus, and in the syllabus, you're obligated to the syllabus. Read it, and you can see my contact information there. By the way, speaking of the syllabus, again, I reiterate, read. People tend to want to scan and guess. Don't do that. That's going to mess you up in this course. Make sure you read the information. The syllabus, the due dates, so on and so forth, they're all in there. And for you that are online, be particularly cognizant of that online attendance forum that you have to complete each week, because if you don't complete it, then you get marked absent. I have no way to know whether you were there or not. And for you guys that I'm going to see in class, we'll have the QR code posted on the whiteboard. If you have a technical problem with that thing, immediately come to the front and see me, and I can mark you there. Please read the part about attendance. Please be aware of the no late assignment submission policy. I don't have time to do late grading. I got too many classes. I got too many things to do without chasing you around to turn something in late. So don't do that. Be on time. If you read, again, underscore capital letters, read, then you're going to be okay. All right, enough of that madness. Let's get into the meat of this thing. What is psychology? It's a scientific study of behavior and mental processes. I would take some notes if I were you, because you'll probably see this kind of things again on a quiz. The word itself, psychology, was thought to be first used by this fellow called Rudolf Geckel. You don't have to worry about that. Also, Rene Descartes sometimes is credited with using the word psychology. And it basically comes from two words, psych or psyche, which is spirit and soul. Many people, modern times, think psyche has to do with your personality or something weird. It doesn't. Psyche is Freud's word for mind, but originally it was spirit and soul. And logia, or logia, whichever way you want to pronounce it, I'm not Latin, so I don't get it, means study. So study of the spirit and soul. That was the original version. Its sense, of course, changed. And now what we say is a scientific study of behavior and mental processes. And let's break that down real quick. I'm not going to get into this much detail with other things, but I do here. Scientific, that's a systematic observation. It's based on measurements and using scientific methods. That's basic science. Everybody here probably has had enough science courses or something similar to know what scientific means. And then behavior. Behavior is anything that we can observe and record. And then here's where the separation comes from you not being trained, not you people personally, but people not being trained in psychology yet making these diagnoses of people's behaviors. Behavior is anything we can observe and record. But you notice in the definition it also says and mental processes. Aha, was mental processes. That's private internal experiences. I can't see those, nor can you. What are those made up of? Thoughts, perceptions, feelings, i.e. emotions, and memories. Nobody on the planet Earth can observe those things. What do we observe based on those things? Behavior. So if you try to diagnose somebody, and let's say they have an anger problem, let's say they have a road rage problem, and you think, okay, he's just a jerk, or she's just a jerk, or they're impatient, or so on and so, any kind of a diagnosis quote that you can make. Well, look, you don't know what's going on up in here. You don't know what their experiences, for example, have been. You don't know how they perceive what's going on in their life. What are their emotions? What do they remember? Something in their very distant past could be affecting their behaviors today. So that's what psychology does. We try to make determinations not related on surface behavior, because that's what you're looking at. You're looking at the surface. We need to dig underneath that. We need to go down underneath into the basement and find out what lurks down there. And can we fix that? Sometimes, sometimes no. Can we help you adjust? Yes. So it depends. Counseling, my PhD is counseling. We work in the here and now. We don't get that deeply involved in psychoanalysis. We use it, but we don't get hyper involved in that as a psychotherapist would. But yet we dig deep enough to get some idea of what's going on in the present, and then make some adjustments, offer you suggestions for adjustments, so on and so forth. So, hope that makes sense. Let's look at what's known as I hate to use the word myth, but let's look at some things here. See what you think. I obviously can't hear your response, but I will help you with this. Testing your knowledge of psychology. If you want to head your little note with that, think about this a minute. We only use about 10% of our brain. True or false? The answer is false. You use 100% of your brain 100% of the time of the day. When you're sleeping, your brain doesn't shut down. It's still active. It's just active in a different way. So that leads us to the next. When most brain activity stops when we sleep. That's false. There are a lot of things going on up there. When we get to cover a section on sleeping and dreams, you'll see how active your brain really is during sleep. Why do you think you dream? So 100% of your brain is in use. There's an interactive component to your brain. It has to work together. And then another thing, punishment is the most effective way to change behavior, and the answer is false. It depends on the person. Punishment It's got a bad rep. It's sometimes necessary. I'm not talking about abuse. I'm talking about punishment. Okay, you can't go play with your friends because you didn't do what I asked you to. You didn't do your homework today, so you're grounded for a couple days. That's punishment. Corporal punishment, which is physical punishment. There are different camps about that. How do you use it properly? Do you need to spank? Do you need to pop your child's hand to make them quit doing something that could potentially harm them, etc.? So punishment is effective when it's used properly, but the person that's being punished also has to respond accordingly. If they don't respond to punishment, then there's other methods. And again, there are a lot of camps. You hear old people say, "Oh, if I'd spank his hind end," that's not the answer to everything. Similarity is one of the best predictors of long-term relationships. True or false? It's true. People say, well, opposites attract. Well, that's a curiosity thing. Have you ever had a relationship with somebody that wasn't anything like you? Potentially. Do they work? Not very often, because down the road they become arguments, depending on how you handle it. So again, these are just, and I'm going to use the word I wasn't going to use. These are myths. These are things that, except for the last one, these are things that really don't have any basis. They don't have any, they're untrue. I'm struggling for words because I don't want to lead you down the wrong path here. Because these things can, some of these things, similarity, for example, can be a little different depending on who's involved in that. And we'll leave it at that. I don't want to get that involved in that and start a discussion about that here. We don't have time. I left something out, though. As we discuss these things, and I ask you to maybe take some notes, I do want you to write down areas of interest that you hear from these lectures, and we're also going to do that in class. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover material in class. We don't do lectures anymore in the one-day class meetings that we have now, but I'm going to present information to you, and then I'm going to ask you in class to please put together, I'll probably divide you into groups, and put together information from whatever you hear that your group decides it wants to speak about. And you're not going to get up in front of the class, do all that stuff. I'm going to ask you as a group to discuss some topic that we hear. So the first half of each meeting on Monday will be you listening to me deliver some material to you, not in a lecture format, but in a discussion format. And then while you're hearing that, jot something down, like, for instance, what's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist? And then we'll discuss it. I would do something a little more complicated than that were I you, but that's just an example. So with that in mind, what is the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist? A psychologist has a PhD or a PsyD. PsyD stands for Doctor of Psychology. PhD is a Doctor of Philosophy. So mine's in counseling, so I'm a PhD in counseling, Doctor of Philosophy. Psychiatrist is a medical guy. They go to medical school. Psychologists treat things from a pathological standpoint. They look for diseased or so on and so forth. We see the results of it, and then we treat the cause of it if we can. Psychiatrist treats the symptoms. They medicate things. Psychologists, even clinical psychologists, are involved in the medication process, but they don't write prescriptions because they're not medical doctors. So they work closely with psychiatrists. Counseling is brought in. We come into the picture to help the person deal with what they're going through. So there's a lot of interaction here, but we don't write prescriptions. We don't do medical things. Even if you're a clinical psychologist, you don't do medical things per se, not like an MD does. But what do we do? Well, we do this. We describe. You come to me and we develop a description of what brought you in, what happened, what's going on. The second thing we do is we try to establish an explanation. Why do we think this occurred? particularly why do you think this occurred? What's made you have this upset? And can we get involved in that and do something to begin to make corrections? And then we predict. This is an identification of the conditions. Am I going to experience this again? When I'm driving, am I going to get mad again? Or you pick something. Doesn't matter. We make a prediction as to the potential of this recurrence. And then with all that information, then we try to make a change. Working together, we call you a client, and we try to change behavior and mental processes, particularly the mental processes. How did I get here? What's going on down in there? Down in there being your brain, your memory, etc. And we got to fix that. So that's what psychologists do. And then what is psychology not? Well, you need to think about this. And I'm going to say a word, and that word is, and the word just went out of my mind, pseudo. The word pseudo means false. So sometimes these things I'm going to mention to you are called pseudo-psychology, false psychology. But let me put something into this and let you think about it. I don't really care for the word pseudo. It depends on how it's being used and where it's being used. But as it applies to psychology, I like to use the word not yet proven, or the phrase not yet proven. So not yet proven psychology as opposed to pseudo-psychology, but either one's fine. And then what am I talking about? What are you talking about, Dr. Dasher? Good grief. Well, here we go. Psychic. This is known as a pseudo-psychology, or in what I've just said, not proven psychology. Predicting the future. This is as ancient as man. We want to know what we're facing in the future because the future sometimes is fearful. So many times we turn to psychics. Not many of us, but many, some do. And what does a psychic do? They play upon your emotions. They're very highly capable of looking at what's troubling you. And you give things away when you go there. And you go there with the attitude of wanting to believe. Suspension of disbelief, it's called. You've probably heard that before. Suspension of disbelief, is wanting to believe. So I go to a psychic wanting to believe what they have to say because they're going to tell me what I want to hear. So is it real? Well, no, because it's never been proven. There's no documentation, and I usually get in class, I usually get arguments from people, and that's fine. What I'm telling you is scientifically based. There is no scientific evidence that we know of where psychic predictions work. Are there experimentations, etc.? Yeah. Even the government's involved in stuff like that. But if psychic were real, then we wouldn't have detective divisions in police departments. We'd just have a psychic division, and they would say, oh, yeah, you can go find that body over here on 4th Street. So we wouldn't have to have a detective division. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm telling you the truth. The military's worked with this. CIA has worked with it, so on and so forth. They work in an area sometimes called remote viewing. I'm not going to get involved in all that. You can read about it. It's pretty interesting, but it's not yet proven. The second area of pseudopsychology, or not yet proven, is mediums, communicating with the dead. This is a Christian college, and if you are a Bible reader, you will see stories in the Bible of people communicating with the dead. So how do we handle that in psychology? Well, psychology is a science, and science doesn't always agree with religion, if you want to call it religion, but the Bible warns about not communicating or attempting to communicate with the dead. Do I know any stories? No. Other than Samuel, but you can read about that deal. At any rate, there's no other than that, which is obviously true since it's in that book. scientifically, there's no evidence that that's possible scientifically. Hope that makes sense. Palmistry, palm reading, nah, nothing there. Again, this is all science. And then psychometry, handling items. You determine facts about. I pick up like this little plate of weight here, and I can make all kind of determinations about that. Now I forget that. Psychokinesis, where I want to shut the door to this room that I'm in, so I just think it and it closes. And then finally, probably the oldest on the planet between psychic and astrology. These probably been around forever. Position of the stars and planets and how they influence people. Can that happen? Most likely because you will it to. Oh no, the moon's going to be over here, and where's Mars in relation to it? And then that means this, so then maybe you make things happen. We are creatures of suggestibility, which, by the way, is how psychic works. They will tell you next year you're going to meet a tall, dark, handsome person, and you're going to fall madly in love. So you spend all the time after the psychic experience looking for that person, and maybe you pick one out. So you make a lot of these things happen yourself. I hope all that makes sense. And I'm not saying this, by the way, denigrating anybody. People believe what they want to believe. I'm telling you the scientific version of it. And I hope that works. Alrighty, so that's a rather long virtual lecture. I don't usually go that long. I usually post 2 or 3 or 4 of these a week, very short, related to the time you spend having to listen to these. So there you go. I will see you folk that are in class people on Monday, and hopefully you online people are going to log into the attendance deal, and everybody does the quizzes. So you got a syllabus quiz that's due this coming week. Please do that. It's very important that you do, because there can be some negative outcomes if you don't. And I'll see you again next lecture, and I'll see you other folk in class. Bye.